Well, first of all, as the future of Gaza, that is really the key issue. As Giddy said,
Live po
was
tayo,
said, yes,
guys.
there were significant risks here. We know
Kasi ano
from
ngayon,
even just the other
release
day, it was
ng
reported that the IDF told the security cabinet that
hostages.
of those
So,
prisoners that were released
makinig
could
tayo.
went on to
Welcome
commit
po,
terror
guys.
attacks. So
So,
Israel has to
hopefully
steel
na,
itself for
ano
that.
na,
Israeli public will have to
tuloy-tuloy
steel
na to
itself for
yung
celebration
ceasefire
in the
ng
streets. And it's not
Israel
just the
at
future of
saka
Gaza, it's the future
ng,
of Judea, Samaria, the
ng,
West Bank
ano,
as
ng
well, because that is actually
Gaza.
where most of the security
So,
prisoners are going to be released.
makinig
And
tayo,
to
guys.
some to East Jerusalem as well. So this is something the Israeli, and of course Hamas is going to spin this as and its supporters as a victory. And Israel, the public has to counterbalance that against against getting the hostages back. But it all depends. The future of Gaza, we don't know yet. That's simply it. And I think a key, and Giddy alluded to it, is in the Trump administration, what it sees as the future. A lot of questions whether a future will involve, for example, forces from the Gulf states, perhaps Saudi Arabia. Will there be an element of the Palestinian Authority? All these are decisions that have to be made on the diplomatic level between the Israeli government and the U.S. government, and within the Israeli government, within the cabinet, and maybe what the future of this current Israeli government will look like if it decides to go down that path.
Or I wanted to give you the last word. What's your take on this issue of the future of Gaza beyond just an agreement?
Right, so I think the key here is that we know we're clear-eyed about the need to degrade and ultimately defeat Hamas. This is the only way to remove the cloud of the heads of Israelis. And you asked about the future of Gaza. I'm much more interested in the future of Israel, to be honest. What is our future? What are our priorities? And I think we have a trump card right now entering the scene, and we got a lot to show for. And there is multiple achievements that were obtained over the course of this war, multiple strategic assets that we need to take advantage of. At the end of these 42 days, have a serious discussion about what are our priorities. In my opinion, this is Iran. It's going to be the next big stage. What are Trump's priorities? And in my opinion, this is the key for Middle East peace and prosperity. To tackle seriously the regime in Tehran. This is how the future of Gaza, by the way, will be much more safe for Israelis as well.
And the future of the whole Middle East. All right, we do have to wrap it up with our discussion for now, but of course we will return shortly. In the meantime, let's take a look at who is set to be released. These 3 Israeli female hostages being released today were among the 33 names of captives, living and dead, to be released over the next 6 weeks in phase 1 of the ceasefire deal. Their identities, of course, are now public. We have more from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Israel has received the list of the 33 hostages, living and dead, said to be returned in phase 1 of the Gaza ceasefire. Families have been informed, but Israel does not know who is alive and who is not. Also unknown is the exact order of the weekly release that means today for 3 on the list to be returned over a 42-day ceasefire. Women, children, elderly, and
Hopefully, guys, tuloy-tuloy na to yung ceasefire ng Israel at saka Gaza.
31-year-old Doron
I'm
Steinberg.
very happy.
The other 30 include the youngest hostages, brothers 2-year-old Kfir Bibas and 5-year-old Ariel Bibas, as well as their mother, Shiri Bibas. The 5 female soldiers taken hostage from their army base in Nahal Oz. 19-year-old Liri Albag, 20-year-old Karina Arayev, 21-year-old Agam Berger, 20-year-old Daniel Gilboa,
Tingnan natin.
20-year-old Naama Levi. Also to be released is 29-year-old Albel Yehud, taken captive from her home in Kibbutz Nir Oz. The list also includes 10 men over the age of 50. They include 58-year-old Ohad Ben Ami, 80-year-old Gadi Moshe Moses, 65-year-old
Hindi.
Siegel, 54-year-old
Hindi.
Omer Calderon, 52-year-old
Tingnan mo.
Shahar,
Dami kong viewers, oh.
56-year-old Itzik Alkarat,
Tingnan mo.
56-year-old Shlomo Mansour,
22, ano pa lang
50-year-old
ako.
Hanomi,
4 minutes pa lang.
84-year-old Oded Lifshitz,
Oh.
and 50-year-old Tzachi Idan. In addition,
Hindi ka
another
makikita na.
11 men under 50
Ha?
are set to be released. They are 35-year-old Bibas,
Maglakad ka na.
46-year-old Yair Horn, 23-year-old Omer Benkirt, 28-year-old Sasha Topanov, 27-year-old Elia
Hindi.
Cohen, 34-year-old Or Levi, 39-year-old Tal Shoham, and 22-year-old Omer Shem Tov, all of which have been taken on October 7th. Another 2 names include hostages from before October 7th. They are 36-year-old Hisham Al-Sayed and 38-year-old Avre Mangisto. The identities of those set to be freed are expected 24 hours before each release. By the agreement, Israel will receive a full status report on the conditions of the living and dead 7 days into the ceasefire. Israel has insisted on first receiving the living first and the bodies at the end. 3 are released today, 4 more on day 7, then 3 every week for 4 weeks. Finally, 14 hostages will be returned in the final 6th week of phase 1. Beyond the 33 on the list, 65 more captives are held, with many no longer alive. They will be returned as part of a second phase of the deal, if comes, that would bring a permanent ceasefire in Gaza.
All right, well, the latest update is that the parents of the hostages who are being released today are now being flown into Re'im Air Base in order to meet their loved ones who are returning home. We will be continuing to provide live updates of what's happening on the ground there. Just a few minutes. It must be terribly emotional and exciting to be part of that right now. We're very, very happy for the families on the ground there.
Kinakabahan din ako.
Hopeful that this will go off smoothly without any issues. But for now, I want to welcome our next guest to shed some insight on the risks associated with the release of so many Palestinian terrorists in exchange for the release of these hostages. We have Brigadier General Amnon Sofrin, the former head of Mossad Intelligence. Brigadier General Amnon Sofrin, thank you for joining us today. I want to start with the most obvious question. How is Israel going to ensure the security of the country with the release of hundreds of convicted murderers?
First of all, it's not the first time that we release prisoners or people imprisoned in Israel. If we did have another option, meaning a military option or military rescue operation, I guess that we could implement
Saan
it,
ito
but
natin ilagay
it
yan?
was not feasible, and therefore we had to give up and make some concessions and great concessions and release a lot of people that are imprisoned in Israel. And most of them are killers that killed the Israelis, and therefore they are imprisoned in Israel. Now, part of them are being sent back into Gaza, and they add to the hatred, and they add to what they call the frustration of the people in Gaza that are totally now hate Israel because of of course, Israel is being blamed for all the destruction of Gaza and all what happens inside this street. On the other hand, some of them are being sent to the West Bank and to Judah and Samaria, and of course, Israel enforced its presence in its military presence in Judah and Samaria in order to be able to block any attempt to raise something. And we have to, this is what they call the risk management, and you have to pay some concessions. Otherwise, these people will stay there forever, and you don't give up.
What international guarantees are in place for the terrorists who are set to be released, if any such guarantees were made?
I'm not sure that we know for sure what are the international guarantees, but based on what the Prime Minister just published yesterday evening, that we have guarantees from the former president and the current president that Israel could go on fighting if the next phase of this release of the hostages is going to fail, and we don't see any option to keep on going with that. We have the right, as he says, of course, to go on fighting in Gaza, but nevertheless, we have to hope for good and to hope that the people, the other people that are being held in Gaza will be released on phase B.
All right, now the final question for today. How likely is it that we will see the return of the remaining hostages after the initial 33, given phases 2 and 3 of this deal are not finalized in the slightest?
According to the agreement, we have to begin negotiations on the 16th day of this phase A in order to bring on the release of these people. And of course, the provision of the Palestinians is that the war will stop, that we will retreat on our presence in Gaza, including Philadelphia corridor and the Sarin corridor, to allow people to get back into the northern part of Gaza. But Israel now took security measures before, and we created some what we call security belt around all the strip of Gaza that is being held by us and our control. And we, of course, have to plan and to see whether we have to get in and carry out some military operations. And that's it. And I hope that Phase B will go on as well, because we don't have the option to leave these people forever being there held by the Hamas.
Absolutely. Brigadier General Amnon Safrin, thank you so much for joining us today. We're all hopeful for a peaceful solution and the return of all our hostages, not just the first 3 today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you and goodbye.
Well, we do have an update from the scene. There are initial Israeli reports that the hostages are in the hands of the Israeli government. Well, I'm excited. Are in the hands of the Israeli government after 15 months in captivity. Really, really incredible moments. We have yet to receive footage of the hostages, but we are receiving initial reports that they have been transferred into Israeli hands. Now on to the final hurdle, which was after the cabinet approval, the High Court of Justice, which heard and rejected petitions against the release of Palestinian security prisoners set to be freed as part of the hostage for ceasefire agreement. The list of those due to be freed is, of course, causing a great deal of concern in the public. The full story we have from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Following the vote by the full cabinet, the Justice Ministry published a list of 1,000 Palestinian detainees and 735 security prisoners that will be released during the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. The first batch of 95 are being set free today. The list includes a number of terrorists serving life terms for the murder of Israelis. They include members of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Fatah. It also includes minors and women being held in Israeli prisons. A total of over 1,700 prisoners are set to be released. Over 700 of them are convicted terrorists serving terms, while some 300 are serving life sentences. 47 prisoners on the list are re-arrested prisoners from the 2011 Gilad Shalit deal. The most notorious name on the list is Zakaria Zubeidi, former head of the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigade, who was involved in a 2021 prison break and later apprehended. Zubeida will be allowed to return home to the northern Samaria city of Jenin, where he was the mastermind of terror attacks during the Second Intifada. Also being released are Wa'il Qassem and Wissam Abbasi, responsible for mass casualty attacks, including the cafe bombing at Sheffield Club in Rishon LeZion and the attack at the Hebrew University Frank Sinatra cafeteria in the early 2000s. When Israelis consider the cost of the hostage for ceasefire deal, the release of murderers that will likely return to terror is biggest issue. Heavy security measures will accompany the transfer of Palestinian prisoners to designated facilities for their release. The IDF will try to minimize celebration for those terrorists returning to their homes in Judea and Samaria.
All right, and we are back with our panel. Caleb Ben David, veteran journalist, Gidi Greenstein, the head of the Roots Group, and Ori Saskar from the IDSF. I wanted to start by getting your take on the Red Cross. There's been some controversy in the past over the Red Cross acting as a sort of Uber service. They haven't really done a lot. They haven't been able to confirm proof of life for really any of our hostages. Very little has been done on that front. Gidi, I would love to get your take on this.
I believe it's actually the role of the Red Cross, which I'm not an expert on, but what I can say is that a lot of these issues with the Red Cross, with UNRWA, with other international organizations in Gaza, these are issues that are part of a bigger package about the permanent status, about the long-term vision of Gaza. What will be the role of these international organizations in Gaza? And in this context, again, I have to say, there was no vision. We moved into this deal without a vision of the day after and the exit strategy. And that lack of vision shaped the current deal. I do want to say that in the context of what was mentioned, that President Trump allows Israel to go back into fighting. Well, America has interests too. And America has already said that their primary interest is a deal with Saudi. And a deal with Saudi is totally inconsistent with going back into fighting. So if the Trump administration is actually focused on a deal with Saudi, I don't see us going back into fighting that soon. Also, there is another provision that your audience should pay attention to, and that is that the second phase could be extended if there is no deal. So right now, the first phase is set to be 42 days. It could go into 50, 60, 80. We know that in the Middle East, there's nothing more permanent than the provisional. I will say also that if we move into stage 3, I'm pessimistic that Hamas can deliver all the prisoners. I unfortunately Sadly, these are gut-wrenching moments where people are coming across. We can see them alive, walking over, hopefully very soon. There will be some, as we say, Ronarads in Gaza. And the only way, so we will get to the end of phase 2. We will have exchanged, let's say, 80, 85, 90 people. There'll be a few left. The only way to find those people who are left is by having an international force in Gaza that could do really deep dive digging and looking for these people in Gaza. So what we're looking at is a much more extended, even in the best of circumstances, much more extended process of releasing the people. Last I'll say about the risk. Yes, hundreds of people are going back into Gaza. Right now, according to the IDF, there is more than 20,000 fighters of Hamas in Gaza. 500 people going into Gaza. This is 2.5% of the existing force of Hamas. Yes, maybe quality, but only 2.5%. So we have to keep things in proportion.
Released to Judea and Samaria as well.
Yes, no, I agree with you, but in Judea and Samaria, we better be in control of Judea and Samaria. We have full intelligence controlling Judea and Samaria, and we should be able to handle these hundreds of people that are moving in there. I will say that in the longer term in the arc of history of the conflict between Israel and the Arabs around us, those Arabs that are at war with us, it's not what happens during the conflict. It's what happens in between conflicts. We are now $50,000 per capita country. Lebanon is
Hello
3,000.
guys,
I
live
just
po
have two
tayo
quick
dito sa
updates.
ano,
What you're seeing now
sa
on the screen is
Israel.
actually the
Tingnan
scenes
natin yung
outside the
ceasefire
prison where some of
starting
these
ngayon.
terrorists are set to be released. Many of the
Release
family
ng
members
mga
of those
hostages.
who have had loved
So,
ones be killed
hopefully
in
na,
different terror attacks
ano,
by these terrorists, the very terrorists who are being released. Quite a few
maganda
murders,
yung
convicted
pag,
murders
walang
are on
mga
this list. So we will continue to follow this. You see already protests building on that. But beyond just the protest against the release of some of these Palestinian terrorists, we've also seen some pushback from the left in Israel. So we've really seen from the left and the right from not making a deal that encompasses all of these hostages.
Right. I do want to say about, on the way here today, I heard a radio interview with one of the women, the prison guards that was sexually assaulted by one of the prisoners who was set to be released, Mahmoud Atala. Who was going to be, there's actually was a petition to try to see if he could deport it out of the country. He's going to be sent back to Nablus, Shechem, where he's from. So again, she was talking about the fear she has about, because he had threatened those guards that he assaulted, that they could be attacked in the future. So you have to understand the feelings that they have.
Of course, we also have the murder of Ori Ansbacher, the young Israeli woman who was raped and murdered in the forest. So some very disturbing.
Right. So we should mute our celebrations, even though I do believe this deal is a necessary deal, because it's a deal for the certainty of the lives of the people that are being rescued from Gaza now, weighed against the possibility of attacks in the future, which is why I believe the deal is necessary. But certainly we should, because we're going to see scenes of celebration now, and we should celebrate with those families, but always keeping in mind the heavy price that's being paid here.
And speaking of a reason to celebrate, I just would like to update you guys that we have gotten reports from the Red Cross confirming that the 3 hostages are alive, that they are doing well, relatively well, all things considered, and there is no threat of life as of now. So that is an incredible sigh of relief being collectively breathed right now throughout the state of Israel. Or I wanted to ask you, I mean, this issue of hostage taking is not new. It's something that we've seen from multiple terror organizations, including Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Islamic regime in Iran. I wanted to ask you, given this long-standing policy of theirs, how can Israel prevent such crises in the future, or at least prevent such a severe incident such as what we're seeing today?
By not repeating the mistakes of the past. And this is very sadly today in the Israeli discourse, in all TV panels that we get our ears on. Way too much of a spirit that a good Israeli serves the other cheek. This is something that we can no longer accept. There have been numerous catastrophic mistakes, including the narrowing down multiple divisions in the IDF, multiple tank categories, the number of reserves reserve days that people are called for, and we got to a point where we saw the Middle East through a very foreign lens. We kind of mistaken how we're happened to live. And so we're living here, and yes, there's a risk factor here. This is a good deal, but this is the least bad deal we could have gotten. And at the end of these 42 days, again, we should be asking serious questions. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the United States has been dealing with the ones imprisoned in Iran. I think President Biden was just criticized for sort of unfreezing the $6 billion in South Korea in exchange for these prisoners. I wish we could unfreeze $6 billion and not release these murderers into our streets. But this is the price you pay for showing weakness on October 7 and before. And I think going forward, yes, Israel deeply wants this normalization with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis want it too. And so the risk factor here is actually not going back to destroy Hamas. The Saudis are testing us. And if we fail to degrade and defeat Hamas, ultimately the whole Middle East will look at us and say, yes, we can extort much nicer prices from these guys. I don't think they would like to bond with the people who are considered to be weak in the Middle East. They're considered to bond with those who are considered strong. This is how you get peace. I think President Trump understands that.
Kalev, now, when it comes to the international community, we have seen a major shift in the hostage negotiations almost the second that President Trump was elected, or President-elect Trump until tomorrow. Why is that? Why is it that suddenly we could see Qatar placing pressure on Hamas, whereas they couldn't before?
I mean, the timing of the deal says it all. This would not be happening if it would not be President-elect Trump now coming into office. He's got leverage over both parties that that Biden didn't have. First of all, to a certain degree, Biden at a certain stage became a lame duck president. There is also the fact that President-elect Trump has shown himself to be unpredictable in the extreme, and that unnerves even his allies. And let's remember, Qatar is in some ways has been an ally of the U.S. in the Middle East. The largest military base, U.S. military base, is in Qatar. They thought that gave them some leverage over the U.S. But with Trump, with President-elect Trump, you don't know what he's going to do. If he would say that base doesn't mean anything to him. That gave him some leverage over Qatar, and of course over Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu clearly feels, I guess, he owes President-elect Trump. To a degree, he doesn't own he didn't owe President Biden. President-elect Trump is able to put pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu that President Biden wasn't political pressure. And clearly that was a deciding factor to bring the deal to fruition now.
All right, well, I know that we do have an update from the ground in Hostage Square from Shosh Bedrosian. Shosh, are you with us?
Hi, yes, Emily, thanks so much. We're here in Hostage Square. We're following all the news that is coming out right now. The Red Cross has transferred or has the hostages right now. Right now we have a guest. We have Sharon Ashir, a Middle East researcher with us. Talk to us about this process. We know that the Red Cross received these 3 female hostages from Hamas inside of Gaza. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, Josh, that first of all, the fact that the Red Cross knew how to receive the hostages now from Hamas, meaning that they are always in direct contact with Hamas, meaning they might knew where our hostages are all this time. I'm not saying that they did know, but they might have known, because now they are giving them back here to Israel. They're rescuing them, but they're not.
Right.
They're more engaged with Hamas than with Israel.
And we talk about what the Red Cross does for people, right? They're supposed to supply life-saving support, different types of medicine. We know that these 3 hostages needed medicine while in captivity. 2 of them were shot on October 7th, and they were injured, brought into Gaza, kidnapped into Gaza. The other one needed medication throughout her daily life. Knowing that these are what these hostages have been living with, and the Red Cross did go into Gaza to get them. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that as an organization that's supposed to give humanitarian aid to all human beings, including Jews and Israelis. Despite this war between Israel and Hamas, they failed badly in their mission. They did not assist any one of our hostages. All this time, it's over than a year that our hostages are in Gaza. Babies, kids, women, men, the elderly. No one received any medication, Shush. No one. So they failed in their mission to give humanitarian aid. I think that this organization must ask itself, should it exist after what happened on October 7th? Do they want to be recognized as a terror attack organization supporter? Yeah. This is like brings very hard and very emotional issues to the table. If they are so pro helping everyone, what about us? Why are hostages? Fear the baby? Where is he? Where is he? Why didn't they help him?
So 14 months ago, we saw another deal come to fruition where we saw the release of hostages from captivity where the Red Cross was also involved. Are we seeing a difference between this deal and this current deal when it comes to these hostages coming out of Gaza?
As for the deal itself, is it different? That's what you mean?
Yeah, the retrieving of these hostages.
I think that the deal itself is inevitable. We had to make this deal. I don't want to call it a bad deal, a good deal. It's a deal. We must return all the hostages back into Israel as soon as possible. The question is, what is the price? And as we know, this is only the first round. Josh, that the hostages are getting back. We will receive them back. Sorry, it's very emotional. Receive them back after so long. And who knows what about all the rest of them after this 42 days process.
Right. I want to take our viewers back to this moment, this place where we're standing, we're sitting, we're reporting from right now. It has so much meaning to the families, to Israelis right here. We discussed that there's no excitement until you know that these hostages are in the hands of the IDF. Tell me what your thoughts are on that.
I think that Hamas tried to trick us all the way since October 7th till today because they have no values, no moral, no empathy. They took everyone that they could with them in order of their own ideology, which is very violent and brutal because the resistance is violent. Okay, they took people, innocent people from their homes, from the party, and just abused them. There is no other way to talk about or like to describe it, let's say it that way. The thing about this deal, I hope that we will receive all the hostages that were on the list for this round. I hope so. We know that by rumors that some of them are not alive. I hope it's a lie and everyone are alive, but we will need to go day by day and to see how this goes along because they are a terror group. Like, they don't share Western values. They believe like in martyrium, which means that they believe that death is more sacred than life. It's like we're dealing with like people that live in another dimension. That's what I feel personally. And that's the main gap because we value life and they value death.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing. This is a really monumental moment for so many people. I do know we are getting more news coming in. Emily, I'm going to send it back to you so you can update our viewers on that.
All right, thank you, Shosh, for that update. We're actually going to cut to Ariella Lachiani on the ground near the hospital where the hostages will be taken very soon, assuming that all goes well with the transfer. What can you tell us about what's happening on the ground, Ariella?
I mean, more and more people are collectively coming here and gathering. There was a slight
collective sigh of relief when we heard that they had been handed over into Israeli hands. But I think that's significant, a real sense of relief will come once we see them, once we see the faces of the people who have been waiting for over 15 months now. So everyone's posted here, checking for updates, but it'll be great to have them here. We've been preparing, the hospital's been preparing to receive them and to treat them and care for them appropriately. So anxiously waiting here for the moment.
All right, well, now the guns have now fallen silent in Gaza after 471 days of war. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz reports how the ceasefire got off to a bumpy start, but is indeed being implemented.
There was a glitch even before the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza had begun. The designated starting time, as announced by Qatar, required that Hamas release the names of the 3 Israeli hostages due to be released 24 hours before the announced start of the ceasefire in Gaza, which was to begin at 8:30 this morning. Just after 10 a.m., the names of Emily Damari, Romy Gonen, and Doron Steinbrecher were finally released. Until then, the IDF attacked Hamas positions and rocket fire was heard along the border. Israel announced the official start of the ceasefire at 11:15 this morning. Up until the start of the pause in fighting, the IDF continued to pound Hamas terror positions in locations across the Gaza Strip. Tanks shelled the Zaytun neighborhood in Gaza City, and airstrikes hit central and southern Gaza. Several gunmen were reportedly killed in the strikes in the Mawasi area west of Khan Yunis. The IDF said that 50 terror targets were hit across Gaza. Now the guns have fallen silent. The IDF redeployed into defensive positions even before the ceasefire got underway. The Gaza division is securing the southern Philadelphia corridor near the Egyptian border. The 162nd and 99th divisions are maintaining positions near the Netzarim corridor in central Gaza. The IDF has bolstered air defenses in the south and is watching for potential ceasefire violations, including potential rocket fire or attacks on troops. The IDF repositioned forces in Gaza and also placed forces in Judea and Samaria in anticipation of disturbances during the freeing of Palestinian security prisoners. With the ceasefire now underway and appeared to be holding just outside the Rafah crossing, aid trucks are lined up in anticipation of the entry of hundreds of trucks daily. Meanwhile, the Houthis continued firing at Israel right up until the ceasefire. Over the weekend, the Air Force intercepted a Houthi missile after sirens sounded across the country, forcing millions to shelter, including in Israel's largest cities, Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Fragments of a shell fell in the Jerusalem area. There were no injuries or damage caused. Later, the Houthis targeted Eilat. The missile was intercepted outside Israeli airspace as sirens sounded in the Arava Desert and over Israel's southern port city. And terror continues in Israel. In Tel Aviv, a terrorist stabbed and wounded several civilians at a coffee shop in the Florentine neighborhood. He was shot dead by a resident with a licensed weapon. The attacker was identified as 19-year-old Salah Yahya, who was a resident of Tulkarem, who entered Israel illegally. Initial reports of gunshots fired by the attacker proved untrue.
Well, we are seeing initial footage from the scene of the Red Cross ambulances that were supposedly holding the Israeli hostages set to be transferred today. The 3 young women who are being transferred today. Apparently, some of this footage is coming live from the ground in Gaza, depicting the crowds of Palestinians in Gaza surrounding the vehicles. There have been large groups of armed Gazans as well as open Hamas members in their uniforms with their insignia, their headbands, surrounding the Red Cross vehicles around the location in which the hostages are believed to be transferred or believed to be being transferred, perhaps even as we speak. In addition to that, we also received reports that apparently some of the footage of the Red Cross in action going to pick up the 3 Israeli hostages was in fact a decoy. In at least one of these cases, Red Cross vehicles had been used to go to a location that the hostages were not at the same time some of these hostages were indeed being picked up by the Red Cross. So with that, we are going to return to our panel for a discussion about what's going on the ground here in Gaza. What is your take on the hostage release so far when it comes to dealing with the Red Cross and the conflicting reports we're seeing just with bated breath as we wait for confirmation, or the first footage, I should say, of these hostages?
we're in a situation where Israel refuses to negotiate directly with Hamas and deal directly with Hamas. So we're using intermediaries. It was Qatar and the Americans in Doha. It's the Egyptians for many years. And it's also some international organizations in Gaza. Just the fact that Israel is working with the Red Cross to connect with Hamas is already sort of a validation to the fact that we can work with this organization. Because, for example, with regards to UNRWA, we cut them out. We don't want to work with them. We don't want to deal with them because they've been contaminated. I do want to say, again, we are looking at a situation in which the lack of an exit strategy shaped this deal. And in this deal, yes, the release of prisoners is a massive blow, but in my view, strategically speaking, an even bigger blow is the resurrection of Hamas. We fought a war to eliminate Hamas as a governing power and also as a military capabilities. Yes, a lot of the military capabilities of Hamas have been decimated, but we're looking at footage with Hamas people with guns in the streets in Gaza in uniforms. So what I want to say is, whether we go back to fighting as or over here assessed, or I believe that we're actually less likely to go back into fighting, what is the day after? Who will govern Gaza in our vision in the day after? And on this, there has been one clear outcome and answer for many months. Gaza has to be divided into area A and B, like in the West Bank. Area B controlled by Israel, which is the security perimeter. Area A by the Palestinian Authority, and that is what allows the international force to come in, to take over, begin reconstruction, do security, and also it is basically what will allow us to move into normalization with Saudi. So I really believe that when the inauguration is over, by the way, anecdotally, the person who's leading the inauguration of Trump is Steve Witkoff. He's been busy in Doha, he's now busy in Washington. Next week, he's looking at us again. And there is a deal to be cut regarding the future of Gaza. And I believe that if we have that vision of transitioning the power in Gaza to the Palestinian Authority, obviously upgraded and reformed and with all these caveats, this is the only way for us to avoid these kind of photos into the future.
All right, I just want to point out to our viewers right now on the screen, there is footage of the Ofer prison in Israel. This is the location in which the security, or many of the security prisoners who are set to be released in this exchange will be released. We showed a little bit earlier footage of some of the protests from family members of those impacted by the terror attacks carried out by many of these security prisoners. And the release of at least some of them is expected to begin in merely a matter of minutes. So we will keep you updated on the live feed from there at Ofer Prison. In the meantime, I wanted to turn to you, ask for your take on what Gidi said in terms of the decimation of Hamas, or perhaps lack thereof.
Well, definitely the decimation of Hamas is a war objective. And so if Israel fails it, that means that we owe a great debt to the Israeli people. And I have to tell you, that there's a new America right now. They call it the golden age of America. I understand that rather than DEI, right, diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're transitioning right now to MEI, merit, excellence, and innovation. I think President Trump is known for his innovation. If you go back to 1993, when 1994 rather, Yasser Arafat marched to the gates of Gaza, we know this was the day, July 1994, that opened the gates of hell on the Middle East. We know how Israel suffered the consequences of the Oslo Accords all the way up until October 7. And so there's a moment when you need to ask yourself, to stop and ask yourself frankly, if this is the way to move forward. And I think not only the Saudis, the United States understands that not only Israel has to make concessions here. We need to find better routes for the future of Gaza. We offer the humanitarian islands plan for the interim phase later on, local municipalities, local tribes, etc. I am having a really hard time to believe the people of Gaza, who have rejected outright the Palestinian Authority, according to any poll, according to 2006 election, all these things will not allow the PA to go back to Gaza. I have to remind you that the Palestinian Authority, it's a hostile entity, paid for slave-paying terrorists over $400 million a year, including the October 7 terrorists, the ICC, ICJ lawsuits. All these things do not make the Palestinian Authority into a viable partner. It does mean that Israel has to come up with an end game. This is our challenge, coming to the president with a real exit strategy, but the one that benefits Israel rather than, brings it back to the past.
I just want to say very quickly on this, the whole idea of bubbles and clans that all referred to has been raised dozens and dozens of times around the Middle East with the Emirates, with the Saudis, and they all said, non-starter, not happening, a fantasy.
Question is-
And look at now. Now we're basically, Hamas is reinstated all over Gaza, all the clans are crushed, and basically, so I do agree with you, we do need an exit strategy, but not an old idea that goes back to the 1980s.
At the end of the day, well, you're on, well, let's take it to the 1990s. At the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves not only what's the Saudi and Emirati interest, but also what's the Israeli interest. That's the question we haven't asked for too many years.
Kalev, what's your take on this?
A couple of things. First of all, I served in the Gaza Strip with the IDF prior to the Oslo Accords, and there was plenty of hell in Gaza before them, including the kidnapping of Israelis and soldiers, terror attacks, and then, of course, even later, there were rocket attacks while the IDF was still occupying it. I don't want to go get into a historical discussion. There is a problem with saying the decimation of Hamas. Decimation, the literal meaning is to destroy 1/10 of a fighting force from the
90%.
What?
90%.
90%, I'm sorry, leaving 1/10 behind. Historically, you can't just defeat a terror group. Israel never defeated the PLO.
You can see even now on the screen, the footage, live footage.
Defeated the IRA. It still exists. Islamic State still exists. But what you have to do is have a strategy of both military might, for sure, and that is what has led to this, the IDF and its military might, with policy moves, with diplomacy, with political moves, with having a vision into it. It all has to go in together. You can't have one without the other. And this is the strategy that Israel is going to have to face. And Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been the prime minister of Israel now for over a decade and a half collectively, he is going to, his legacy, despite all these past, 16, 17 years in total, his legacy will be determined by some of the decisions he's going to be making in the next few weeks, if not months. Critical decisions that he tried to avoid for many, many years, but he understood, but that he acknowledges it because he saw the Middle East as being static at the time. Things are changing now. Big decisions are going to have to be made by the Israeli government and by the prime minister.
Now, one of the comments we saw just earlier today from the foreign minister, Gideon Sa'ar, was an emphasis on the fact that this deal was a temporary ceasefire, I would love to get a take from all of you on whether or not you think Israel is actually preparing to implement or negotiate on phase 2 and 3, or are they really just preparing for another escalation? I'll let you take it away, Or.
So we are definitely preparing for day 16 of the ceasefire when we're supposed to be starting to negotiate on the next phase. I happen to believe that the prospect of Israel stopping the war altogether is slim. I do think that the Israeli public will not feel safe going back to the south without proper security arrangements, not guarantees, proper security arrangements with the IDF. And you know, this has, you know, I'm going back to a great quote by Ronald Reagan. They asked him about the Soviet Union. You know, they're on the rise, we're on decline. What's our strategy? What's our end game? He said, well, we win, they lose. That's my strategy. And at the end of the day, despite of all the talking heads, and despite of all the experts that pressured him the opposite, he happened to decimate, you know, well, not decimate, by leading the process that eventually led to the fall of the USSR. So, yes, we cannot wipe out Hamas as an ideology, perhaps, but you can usher in new conditions in Gaza. And that means that Hamas will no longer control Gaza, will no longer arm in Gaza, and the kind of notion that Israel has to sort of bend its interests to the will and whims of its neighbors, who have proven time and again that they're not interested in the safety of the Jewish people. I think at some point, yeah, absolutely, Israel has excelled in having non-strategies before, absolutely. But this is a different moment now. Okay, and past October 7, we have seen Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, Bashar al-Assad, Yemen, and Iran itself, all suffering heavy strikes. And at this moment in time, it's not time to go backwards. It's time to ask ourselves serious questions, how to guarantee Israel's security from Gaza. Going back to the past, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, will simply not do the trick. Palestinians will not become Zionists, but we do need to have new ideas in Gaza.
Gidi, what's your take? Is this a temporary ceasefire or a preparation for something more escalation?
I agree, we do need new ideas, and here is an idea, because just saying what not is not the solution. We have to say what yes. National security is about choosing between available options. It's not about denying options or some fantasies. What are the options available to us on the table? This is the question that the government of Israel will have to face in the next 16 days, 42 days. I do want to say, There has been a strategy. It has not been announced, but it has been there. Prime Minister Netanyahu decidedly separated between Gaza and the West Bank, between Hamas and the PA. And the goal was to prevent any kind of political movement toward the resolution of the conflict. Hamas was actually acknowledged as the ruler of Gaza from 2014 until 2023. During the war, so basically bifurcating the Palestinian entity. During the war, Netanyahu said, Hamastan like Fatahstan, they're all the same. Again, bifurcating. Then in the negotiation, no role for the Palestinian Authority. Discussing the release of Marwan Barghouti to Hamas. Just think about how disastrous this is going to be when Marwan Barghouti is released to Hamas in the second phase of the deal. And then moving forward, not introducing the Palestinian Authority in northern Gaza that Israel controlled. Now Israel is pulling out and Hamas is moving into northern Gaza. Okay? This is a consistent strategy. You can say that you like it, some people don't. But there is a consistency in the strategy of bifurcating the Palestinian Authority. And that strategy led to the moment that we're in which Hamas, we are negotiating with Hamas without participation of the Palestinian Authority, and by negotiating with Hamas, we are empowering Hamas. Next, Hamas is moving into and controlling Gaza. Third, look at the agreement that was signed. There is going to be a renewal of economic activity in phase 3 with Hamas, not based on the Paris Protocol with the Palestinian Authority, but with Hamas in Gaza. You're talking about Israel controlling the perimeter without declaring sovereignty. Okay, so this is again a provisional arrangement. We're looking at a series of arrangements that are shaped by a strategy, which is bifurcating between Gaza and the West Bank. You have a leader in Ramallah who is against Iran, consistently against Iran, Abu Mazen. There is security collaboration. We're seeing right now in Tulkarem and in Jenin coordinated security activities. There has not been a claim that he's involved in terrorism. There are a lot of issues with them, corruption, play for slay. I agree with you on all of that. But the comparison, this versus Hamas, now is the moment of truth. This is what I'm saying. Oh, you may agree or disagree, or we may agree, or other people. This is the moment of truth. Day 16, what do we want from ourselves? Because if we don't say what we want, I believe that the Americans will tell us, because the Americans have a huge at stake. They want the Saudi normalization. Saudi is part of their vision called IMEC, the India, Middle East, European corridor. The India, Middle East, European corridor is essential for blocking Iran. It's the American response to the Belt and Road Initiative of China. There are huge things at stake, and by the way, this could be our way of pushing back on Iran.
We do have to cut because we do have an update from Ariella on the ground next to the hospital. Of course, we will circle back and give you guys a chance to close up. But Ariella, what can you tell us about what's going on?
Right, so I'm here now with the international spokesman of the Israel Police, Dean Elsdar. So Dean, can you tell me a little bit about how Israel has been preparing to receive these hostages today?
So we've been implementing a lot of different preparations for various scenarios. Right now, the Israel Police is spread out across the country, contributing in various ways to Operation Wings of Freedom, which is very dear to our heart. We're going to be guarding and escorting our loved ones as they return right now from terrorist captivities to the hospital. We're going to be standing outside the hospital, outside their homes. And it's important to remember that in the framework of this release of our loved ones from terrorist captivities, where they were taken from their homes, from a Nova Music Festival, is the release of terrorists. And so the Israel Police is also preparing for this. And I want to make it very clear to all of your viewers and to anybody listening that the Israel Police has a zero tolerance for any type of celebration, anybody identifying with or supporting these terrorists or a terrorist organization. We're going to act accordingly, decisively, just as we have over the last few days, where terrorists, people that identified with terrorists wrapped themselves in Hamas flags, were handing out sweets in Shofat in Jerusalem. We went in, we arrested them, they're in custody right now.
And so what can we expect to see over the next few hours? Like, do you think we'll be able to see, footage of the hostages here? How will the next couple of days play out?
So the hostages are due to arrive by helicopter, and then they're going to come right behind us. They're going to be driven through these very doors. All of us are waiting for this moment. There's mixed emotions, I have to say, in the country right now, but we are very unified in our feelings of bringing our loved ones home. We've been waiting for it for over a year now, and I don't think that there's going to be a dry eye around here.
For sure not from me. Dean, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Emily, back to you.
All right, well, in the midst of the ceasefire for hostage deal taking place now across the world, another major exchange is about to take place, the inauguration of President Donald Trump. Let's take a look at what we expect to see in Washington, D.C. tomorrow.
It's no secret that the election of Donald Trump helped pave the way for a deal to be made between Israel and Hamas. Shortly after Trump won the U.S. presidential election, he issued several statements promising there would be, quote, hell to pay should the hostages remain in captivity on the day he takes office. Various experts have speculated on the exact meaning of Trump's threat, but it was certainly heard by Hamas, who after months of insincere negotiations had abandoned the effort. Trump's pick for Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff was also an active part of the hostage negotiations in Doha over the past several weeks. But while the Biden administration has been implying the ceasefire deal is the path to ending the war altogether, Israeli officials are stating nothing of the sort, promising the ceasefire is temporary. It is unclear if the upcoming Trump administration will apply pressure to the parties over phases 2 and 3 of the deal. But both the Biden administration and the Trump administration gave Israel assurances that should negotiations fail over phase 2, the IDF will return to fighting Hamas in Gaza. The Trump administration is also expected to be one of the most pro-Israel administrations in history, similar to President Trump's first term. U.S. officials have already stated that Trump plans to implement a maximum pressure 2.0 campaign on the Islamic regime in Iran, which sponsors, trains, and arms Hamas along with other terror proxies like the Houthis and Hezbollah. At the same time, the Trump administration is expected to advance peace initiatives, including a major objective of securing Israeli-Saudi peace as an expansion of the Abraham Accords. In the aftermath of the ceasefire announcement, Trump took to social media to note specifically that his administration will continue promoting peace through strength and further advance the Abraham Accords. While there are many unknowns in the future of this region, with inauguration of President Trump tomorrow, we may well be seeing the start of a new era in the region.
Well, we do have additional footage coming from on the ground inside Gaza. As you can see, there are numerous Hamas terrorists who are surrounding the vehicles where it's believed at least some of the hostages or those working with the hostages in this process of exchange are being transported in those vehicles. You see a lot of Hamas members on the ground. This is a live feed from Al Jazeera. We can see now Doron is, well, obviously alive. This is the first proof of life we have seen of Doron for pretty much since the first hostage, one of the first hostage videos that was released by the Hamas terror group on the ground there. So we see a huge crowd of Hamas terrorists surrounding this vehicle. We see also the Red Cross. The Red Cross vehicles coming in to secure that transfer of Doron into Israeli hands. We're trying to decipher exactly to confirm 100% that is Doron. Again, this is a feed from Al Jazeera that we are sharing live from the ground inside Gaza. Hopefully we will see the safe transfer of all of these 3 hostages. Very alarming scenes, I must say, of hundreds of Hamas terrorists, or seemingly hundreds of Hamas terrorists surrounding the vehicle here, if not thousands, certainly. Similar scenes to what we've seen in other hostage releases that we saw earlier in the war. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinians, both civilians or self-declared civilians, along with Hamas terrorists who were surrounding the vehicles in the initial exchanges. Armed terrorists, I should emphasize. Many of the hostages who were released were reported to have been beaten, or their vehicles being heavily banged on by masses, by crowds who are on the ground in Gaza. We are going to cut to Shosh on the ground in Hostage Square. We do not have Shosh. We do not have Shosh. So we will turn to our panel now to discuss what's going on the ground in the Gaza Strip. What do you think of the scenes we're seeing today?
What mixed emotions.
Absolutely.
On one hand, to see, and I think Giddy mentioned that these Hamas fighters putting on their uniforms for the first time, really, since the beginning days of the war. So many out there supporting. You see so many of the Gaza civilians out there, and we've heard about the suffering in Gaza, but we see here what look, out there having these celebrations and how well armed and how many of those Hamas fighters, and those are disturbing pictures. On the other hand, as you said, it did appear to be footage of Doron Steinbrecher there, looking at least in good enough condition, and I may have been even a second Nazir, I'm not sure, looking in good enough condition. We can only imagine what they felt at that moment in order to go out on their own and be in good enough condition. It's a very good sign that they brought the families also to the Reem base. It means they've determined that they're in good enough condition to meet their families now. I mean, seeing this after 14 months, I've been covering this story as a journalist, as you have, every day since October 7th. It's very emotional to see these mixed emotions, seeing these pictures, but most of all, joy for the return of these 3 girls.
I do want to confirm that the Red Cross did confirm 100% that all of the hostages were transferred into their hands, into the Red Cross at least. We do know that they are all alive, and I should also emphasize a slight correction from earlier that while we know that the 3 hostages are alive, that doesn't necessarily mean in good condition. We do not know yet the extent of their injuries, but we do know that they are alive. So that is the update that we have now. Or I'd love to hear from you. What's your take on the, quite frankly, alarming scenes that we're seeing from the Gaza Strip with the transfer of these hostages?
Quite extraordinary pictures we're seeing right there in the Gaza Strip, and I think it only highlights who we're dealing with here. I mean, Hamas clearly loves this political achievement. I mean, what extraordinary scenes of Palestinian mob surrounding these poor Israeli hostages who really did nothing wrong. And we have no idea in what condition they're coming back to Israel. Clearly, after 15 months in captivity, no one will go back the same as they were. And seeing the bravery, I think, of this young girl in front of this mob only highlights, our bravery and their, the value of human life. I think Hamas is an extraordinary political achievement here with the masses in the public square, really. It's a show of force for Hamas to be able to brag to their own people. There you go. I captured this young innocent Israeli girl. I think we are constantly reminded in here that we're not dealing nor with a Western country nor with the like-minded society. We're dealing with people who are obsessed with anti-Semitic vile rhetoric, who are obsessed with executing the next October 7. We heard Khalil al-Khaya, the Hamas official in Qatar, vowing to repeat the October 7 again and again and again.
After the ceasefire.
After the ceasefire was announced.
Yeah.
And not only him, my dear friend here forgets, Fatah himself praised the October 7 and vowed to repeat the October 7 attacks after the ceasefire was released. So really, we have become disillusioned, in my opinion, from all the promises of the past. Yes, we have to pick our poison. We have to pick out of a set of alternatives. We don't deny that. But falling back in the paradigms of the past will simply lead us to the next October 7th. In my opinion, this is a time of reflection on who we are as a nation and where we want to take this from this point on.
All right, now moving to Hostage Square, we do have an update from ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian on the ground there. Shosh, what can you tell us about the scenes?
Wow, electric. Emily, when you gave us that update that Doron, there was proof of life of Doron inside of that Red Cross vehicle, we saw it right here in the live stream. People are moved to tears over seeing these hostages alive after 15 months of being in Hamas captivity, not knowing what the conditions have been like. But to see Doron with a smile on her face in that vehicle was unbelievable for the crowd. Right behind me, people are gathering. More and more people are coming here to watch this live stream of what is happening inside of Gaza right now. People moved to tears. People filled with so much excitement. Most people having no words, just their eyes locked into the screen to see it for themselves that Doron is alive. She was in that Red Cross vehicle, and there was a smile on her face. She probably was realizing this is it. She's going back home to Israel. Monumental moments here, historic moments for so many people watching this all unfold. A lot of emotions. People want to continue to see this. You hear more cheering right now in the background. I'm not sure what they're looking at. Probably more good news, which is great. But you'll hear the crowd cheer, shout all of a sudden because they're watching all of this unfold in real time. But this has been the center point for so many people. The energy is lively here, wanting to see the updates of these girls coming back home to Israel. Many people just gathering together, hugging each other. The teacher of Romy was actually here. She was front and center holding a poster in Romy. She said that she can't believe that finally Romy is back in the hands of the Red Cross coming into Israel. She said she's been waiting for this moment and she feels so much better knowing. She showed me the poster she was holding of Romy from the beginning since October 7th, and she was kidnapped from Nova, the Nova Music Festival. She said, I don't want to hold this poster any longer now that I know that she is finally on her way back home. Emily, I'll send it back to you.
Shosh, we are receiving an update now just from the IDF and the Israel Security Forces confirming that the Red Cross said that all 3 Israeli hostages were transferred to them, of course, and are on their way to the IDF. It's unclear if some of them have already been transferred. But Shosh, I wanted to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about, we just saw Doron. You mentioned that she had a big smile on her face, probably endlessly relieved to be out of the hell of the Gaza Strip. What can you tell us about Doron, the 31-year-old veterinary nurse from Kfar Aza?
Yeah, so Doron, like you said, was a vet. She had a love for animals. She was known for being the best aunt in the world. She has little nephews that apparently have talked about her every single day since she has been in Hamas captivity. It seems as if she has a close-knit family. She was taken from her apartment on Kfar Aza, and she was actually able to send a voice note to her friends as she was taken, saying, they're here, they're outside my door, and they have me. That has been a haunting voice note for her friends. That was 15 months ago, 470 plus days ago. That was the last sight. That was the last thing that they heard Doron say for herself. While she was in captivity, Hamas did release propaganda video of her, a sign of life, which was back January of 2024. So to see Doron with that smile in her face, the last time we saw any proof of life of her was 1 month ago. This is a moment that I won't forget. Emily, I know you won't forget. People behind me will never forget being in this moment, being together, seeing her with a smile on her face after, like you said, hell in captivity inside of the Gaza Strip.
All right, well, we will continue to update as these breaking news updates come in. Thank you, Shosh. All right, well, circling back to our panel, I want to ask you guys, how do you respond to this exciting moment? I'll start with you, Kalev, because I know we had to cut off to get the update from Shosh. What is your take on what we're witnessing?
I mean, we're witnessing, first of all, just on a human level, just tremendous to see. What I hope is certainly just enough to see these 3 women come out, but the hope of obviously we're in a new phase of the conflict, as we've discussed, and we've discussed the sort of bigger picture here. But let's keep the focus on the hostages. This should be the phase of the conflict in which the focus is on getting as many of the hostages out as possible in the coming weeks, because anything could happen, as we've said. Seeing disturbing, as I said, to see what is happening in Gaza now, and that raises all kinds of questions about the future of Gaza and how Israel's handled. But for the moment, let's just breathe a sigh of relief, apparent relief, that these 3 women are out, and so many others that we are hoping to hear either release or hear of the fate of the Bibas family, or Sagi Dechelchen, or Kisigel. So many, too many. I don't even want to go through that. We just want to hear about what is their fate and see them back home with their families.
Kitty, what is your response to the first signs of life we've seen in a while for Doron?
Last Friday, I was sitting with my family on Shabbat Table, and we're actually speaking about the fact that probably they're not coming back anytime soon. Right at that moment, apparently, Steve Witkoff called the Prime Minister and said, I'm coming, and we're having a meeting tomorrow. So things could change very, very quickly. I can't even say how emotional I am about that. When I saw Lily Elbach's clip, I thought I was seeing someone who's already not with us. And she may be back next week. This is incredible. This is just unbelievable that we're seeing this right now. I do want to say that hopefully there is a learning curve, because it is in Hamas' interest to deliver these prisoners. And this is a mob that could have threatened the life of people that have survived 15 months in captivity. So
I hope that there's a learning curve, and we'll see. We won't see this next week when the next group comes over. And also, as emotional as we are, and many other people in Israel, this has an effect on the ability to decide to go to war in 42 days. Because if we decide to go to war in 42 days, if it is in our decision, sometimes it may not be in our control, we will be in a situation where we're effectively condemning some other people to death. The last thing I'll say, yesterday we brought back Oron Shaul, 10 years after he was gone.
I just want to point to our screens right now. We have a live feed coming in that is
live na.
believed to be the actual transfer of at least
transfer
one
na
of the
siya.
hostages. Hopefully all three of the hostages, but this is what we are told that we're seeing. Again, we still have yet to confirm 100% that those are the vehicles, but this is the feed that we have coming through right now.
Can I just say on Oron Shaul, just
Sure,
finish
yeah.
my thought? So Oron Shaul has been 10 years in Gaza. The entire Israeli intelligence has been focused on finding him and Adar Goldin. These are bodies, they're buried somewhere. And until yesterday, we couldn't bring him over. It just shows us how much we know, but also how little we know about what's going on in Gaza. So there will be dispatch 33, bringing down from 98 to 65. There'll be another batch. We'll go back to around, hopefully around 10, 15. But moving forward, it will require a much more surgical operation. And that, I think, will probably happen in the third phase of the deal if we get there.
Well, one of the things that was agreed upon in this deal was, of course, the release of one prisoner in exchange for 30 Palestinian prisoners, or in some cases 50 Palestinian prisoners, including, by the way, for Avera Mengistu. You mentioned that the bodies of Hadar Goldin and Oren Shaul, the one that was recovered this morning, these have been a priority for the IDF to return these Israelis back to their families, at least for burial. In the case of Avera Mengistu, who entered into Gaza and has been held there for 10 years, or the case of Hisham al-Sayed, an Arab Israeli who has been held by Hamas for many years, they are both within this list of the first 33. In addition to that, the government specifically negotiated that they would release 30 prisoners for each one of them, in addition to 57 more prisoners in exchange for, an Arab Israeli and Avera Mengistu, who is Israeli of Ethiopian descent. So we really are focused. What we're seeing here is the implementation of hopefully no hostage left behind, dead or alive. What is your take on this prisoner exchange rate, shall we say? And in addition to that, I'd love to hear your comments on Doron, the first scenes that we've seen.
Oh, absolutely. First, just on the human level, okay? Just on the human level, to see this brave young woman in front of this mob. I don't know if many of us, tough men would be able to stand this. And this is really, really inspirational. And to see her after 15 months of captivity really gives us all some humility, in my opinion. Now look, and the second thing that comes to mind, does anyone have any doubts, seeing these scenes, that there is any separation between Hamas and the Palestinian population in Gaza? Does anyone have any doubts that we're dealing with 2 million radicalized Palestinians? Now there's some of them want to cooperate in exchange for some personal benefit. But does anyone ever doubt that Hamas is to be separated from the Gaza population on the ideological level, at least? Now, you're right, at least 30 prisoners are to be exchanged for every Israeli hostage. We're seeing how, as was mentioned by my friend here, how after so many years of bodies of Oron Shaul, Hadar Goldin kept in the Gaza Strip, we finally brought them home. And it shows us, yes, the power of leverage, that Hamas understands that they need to bring them back, but also the total intelligence-wise dark spot we had in Gaza for so many years. We had absolutely no idea where they were. And because we were on the ground in Gaza, that's the kind of intelligence that only the Shin Bet 504, the Israeli Intelligence Corps, only them can bring. We saw, very interestingly, in Syria, same thing happened with Eli Cohen. We hope for his body to return, but to be honest, this is all just reflective of the situation we're in, that yes, we're dealing with a radicalized population here that does not distinguish between an innocent life and maybe a legitimate military target in their eyes and so on. We're dealing with a radicalized population. And at this moment, yeah, we have to pick our poison, but also we shouldn't serve the other cheek. We should be sober. It will be irresponsible to go back to October 6th, irresponsible to go back to 1994, irresponsible to just bring the Israelis back to the eve of the war. Otherwise, all the bloodshed was really for nothing. I think this is the big lesson that Israel and the world need to take from this.
All right, well, in just a few minutes, I believe we will be receiving some of the footage of the hostages inside of Israel, so we'll stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, Kalev, I would love to get your take on this issue. You know, we know that in the Gilad Shalit prisoner exchange, over 1,000 prisoners were released. Dozens of those have recommitted terror offenses since that incident, including the Barkan Industrial Park terror attack in which 2 were killed, and of course Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of October 7th. How do we know that these prisoners aren't going to recommit? What guarantees are there?
We don't know, and there are no guarantees. Let's be honest and frank about that. And by the way, I can remember after the Gilad Shalit deal negotiated by Prime Minister Netanyahu, there was a lot of discussion. This is the last time. It won't happen again. We will never exchange hostages for. It should only be 1 for 1 in the future. Of course, nobody ever imagined that something like on the scale of October 7th would happen again. So all of those calculations, we just have to accept the fact that Israel pays and accepts the fact that there is always going to be a high price to pay for getting hostage back. And there's an important reason for that too. Israel, the country, the government, the IDF demands a lot from the citizens of Israel, from the soldiers who serve, and even the civilians who live in some of these areas, in the north, on the northern border, and the southern border. Israel demands a lot, and there's part of the social contract there that, okay, we demand a lot, but if, for example, God forbid, you should be taken hostage, we will do everything in our power to get you back, even paying a price that is way excessive, that could put other Israelis at risk. It is part of the ethos of sacrifice of Israelis. And by the way, Romy, one of the hostages who's coming back, she's probably only alive today because a young man named Ben Shimoni tried to rescue her at the Nova Festival, was driving away with her in his car. He was killed in the crossfire. She was wounded, but obviously taken alive in decent condition. He sacrificed he went back, that was the 3rd time, he went back and sacrificed his life to save Israelis. Yes, Israelis are taking a risk. We may be sacrificing some of our own lives, all of us, for the release of these hostages. But that is, as I said before, part of the social contract that Israelis live under.
All right, you made an important point, I think, for our viewers, which is that we do know that Romy Gonen and also Emily Damari were injured on October 7th. Both of them had been shot in the hand or close to the hand. In one of the cases, Emily also had a shrapnel injury in her leg before she was taken into Gaza. We have not received any updates in terms of their condition in regards to those injuries, how they healed, what sort of treatment they received. But of course, we'll keep you updated on all that information. We now would like to go to Emmy Palmore, the CEO of Natal, to discuss a little bit about what the hostages are expected to, what their return is expected to be like in terms of care, psychological care, physical care, medical care if needed. So Emmy, thank you for joining us. I would love to start by getting your take on all of what we're seeing in the past hour and a half and what the procedure will be for these returning female hostages.
Okay, so first I'll just mention that in the past, I was the Director General of the Ministry of Justice and the Director of the Department of Pardons, and I was involved in the Shalit deal. So this brings back a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings that have to do with that event, but this is a completely different challenge because, first of all, we have to assume that everything is not only difficult and complex and traumatic. There is no experience, and we know that because when the first hostages came back, Natal and other experts did a lot of effort to try and find literature, research about anything that was similar to that kind of captivity, and it was impossible to find. So you can just imagine how much more difficult it's going to be this time. First of all, I assume that their physical condition is difficult. Even just to be exposed to light, to walk, to be exposed to noise, to be exposed to human contacts. And we saw how the hospitals have been prepared to give them, the majority of privacy and really the type of treatment that you give to someone who really has to be separated from the world before it will be exposed to everyone. there is a lot of, I would say, thinking and consideration, even with the media. I participated in panels today and yesterday.
Ala, naana jud
How the media understands, and let's see that they do it, that they have to give them time. They have to let them
Kinakabahan.
some kind
Kinakabahan
of,
ako.
well, they will never be anonymous again, and this is a huge problem when you live in a small place like Israel. But just think about everything that we have assumed that happened to them during the captivity.
Ayan na sila sa sasakyan. Tapos i-transfer sila sa tawag nito sa helicopter. So papunta dito sa sa Israel. So tingnan natin, guys.
Even, deny
Tingnan
things
natin.
that have been said about you, and let us remember when they were taken hostage, they were, young women that none of us have ever heard of. So there is a lot of thinking, first of all, on how to give them back control of their lives. This is one of the most important things that therapists are talking about when you speak about people who came back from such a trauma. They have to get hold of even the smallest decisions about their lives. What do they want to eat? What do they want to wear? What kind of medication they want to take. I know that it caused a lot of, well, again, I will say challenges when the other hostages came back. But I believe and I trust that the teams have learned everything they could from the hostages who are with us for over a year, not only from how they were received, but also how they've been doing ever since.
Emmy, I just wanted to ask you, we did see a report this morning about how the hospitals and the Israeli authorities had put together a plan for the return of at least the female hostages, in particular, these first 3 female hostages. And they put together an almost exclusively female medical team to greet and work with the female hostages based on some of the, I believe, past experiences that you mentioned. What have we learned so far, and why might that be the appropriate or the best path forward for some of these young women who are returning?
First of all, I don't think that there is one right answer, and it doesn't mean that there isn't a man who is capable of being the doctor or the nurse. But we have to assume that from the stories that we've heard from the hostages who came back, that they have been exposed to a lot of violence and a lot of intimidation. And I think that the thought is not that there isn't a single man who can be the right man to take care of them, but that it would be easier and more comfortable for them to be surrounded by women. We don't know what they have experienced. We don't know what they want to share. We don't know, even, I don't know, even changing clothes or even, starting to handle all kind of wounds that they have. We have to assume that they will feel more comfortable in a surrounding that is more feminine and is adjusted to their needs. I'm sure that if they need an expert, and the only one that there is a man, they will not refuse, the right medical treatment just because it's a man. But I think that trying to be considerate, trying to be soft, trying to understand from which, environment they're coming is part of what those teams have been prepared to. And by the way, not only for those 3 hostages, there are teams who have been working on everything, on the soldiers, the female and the male that are supposed to come back. It's a group that we assume that have been tortured, and also the older men who are supposed to come back, and others. So there is a lot of preparation, and again, I want to say there isn't enough experience, there isn't enough knowledge to compare to this type of captivity. By the way, the biggest challenge was how to treat the children, because this was definitely a first. And I hope, in spite of the fact that I really believe in research and data and everything, that lessons learned from this experience will be of nobody's use in the world.
All right. Amy Palmore, the CEO of Natal, thank you so much for shedding some insight on this difficult situation, surely for the hostages, despite the fact we're all delighted to have them home. Thank you, Amy. Going back to our panel here in the studio, I wanted to get you guys' take on the next steps. I mean, what do you expect to see from the hostage exchange? Do you expect that it will continue peacefully throughout the rest of the day and we'll see the safe return of these 3 hostages? What's your prediction for what we're seeing?
I just want to pick up on where Amy left, and that is there are 2 systems that the state of Israel has created over 75 years, over 100 years, that are really outstanding. The military is one of them, and the healthcare system is the other one. We have one of the most outstanding healthcare systems in the world. And we are now at the intersection between the military and the healthcare system. And what we're seeing here is the best of the best that Israel can bring forward. These are systems that are learning systems. I'm sure there's been a lot of extraction of knowledge from the previous exchange into this one. And hopefully the next ones will be even better and better. And also I want to say something about Amy and Natal and the mental health care system that has been created in Israel. This is also outstanding. Our ability to deal with PTSD, with trauma in this country is exceptional. All these non-governmental organizations and governmental organizations all together, really, I don't think that there is any other country in the world that could do this, what we're seeing right now, receiving the hostages better than Israel is doing. I know it's a very, very sensitive moment, but this is also the best in the world, no doubt for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Kalev, I wanted to get your take. What do you expect to see through the remainder of this hostage exchange?
I think there's a certain momentum that builds. If we see, because when we came to the studio today, not sure all of us expected that we even would see these 3 women.
We even spoke about it, yeah.
Be released, and now there was a lot of talk that Hamas was going to delay it. There was to be. So if we see in the next couple of days, Romy, Emily, and Daron emerge from Gaza in reasonable health and condition, how their families appear in the media, maybe they do, that does build a certain momentum going forward for certainly on Israel's side to proceed with the deal. And yes, as disturbing as these pictures are, they also do give a certain impetus to Hamas to continue on, to show the releasing of hostages in a way as they're claiming a victory, a show of strength. So I think moving on through phase 1, there is, like I said earlier in the program, there might be problems with starting the process of letting Palestinians start to relocate back from the south to the north. But I think today, so far, there is a certain momentum building that gives me some optimism that we will see at least the phase 1, the release of the 33, the initial, that will proceed forward.
Or I would love to get your take. We know that the hostages are first being transferred to the Red Cross, then being transferred into the IDF within Gaza, then being transferred to the IDF on the Israeli side, and finally, after that, being transferred to the hospital for further examination, reunification, with their families. What is your take on what we've seen and what we're going to see in the next few hours, even?
Right. So this is where we're really tested, and this is where the system that we built is put to the test. And as you said, I mean, these hostages are returning to Israel right now after so many days in captivity, so many long months. We don't, those who came back divide between those who came back, in a very relatively bad shape, and then sort of had a curve. But then those who came back relatively, on a hype, and relatively, so almost an ecstasy, right, to go back to home. And then there was a drop sometime later.
I'm sorry, I just have to interrupt you because we did just get the update from the IDF itself that Romy, Emily, and Daron are all in the hands of the IDF. I'm very, very excited to be able to report this, having met these families, a really emotional moment. We can't wait to see them and to welcome them back to Israel. And of course, all our hearts go out to not only their families in celebration today, but also in unity with the families who have yet to see their loved ones return. A huge moment. I'm sure we'll be sharing footage of that shortly. Your response?
Oh yeah, I mean, we would all love to see these pictures, right? I mean, we've been waiting for this for 15 months now, and I think really this is our moment where we pause for a second and assess, first of all, the great human moment right now, seeing 3 fellow Israelis back home, but also, being very clear-eyed about the mission here. I mean, we don't want to see any future kidnapping taking place. And the big question is, what are the conditions to safeguard Israel's security long-term? We constantly, now we're dealing with the moment in time in which we are, but then, except for the next 5 minutes, we also need to think about the next 5 generations. This is really our moment to say, this has been the longest war in Israel's history, the most expensive one, almost the priciest one in terms of, bloodshed and casualties. And so this is needless to say, the largest terrorist attack in Israel's history. And so what we need right now is not to fall back on the paradigms of the past. We need to ask ourselves serious questions, not to spin doctor reality. We're not here lying to ourselves that somehow we will leave the Gaza Strip, leave Judea and Samaria, hide behind a tall wall, and things will be just well, the whole Arab world would accept Israel. I think we have become disillusioned from these promises in the past. The way to reach Riyadh goes through Jerusalem, not through Gaza. Israel needs to be strong. And I think, to be honest, it goes through Tehran as well. Iran will be the next game here. Even over the course of the next 42 days, let's see what happens in the Middle East.
Absolutely. And for now, I think we'll focus on the celebration of the families. I'm sure that we will have footage of that shortly. We are going to go to Shosh in Hostage Square, who has an update for us on the ground. Shosh?
Hey, Emily, just as you announced that all 3 of these female hostages are officially back in the hands of the IDF, the crowd went crazy here. There is not a dry eye in this crowd. Everyone is emotional watching this live stream right here, seeing the 3 of them in the Red Cross vehicle. Like we mentioned before, Lorna at one point had a smile on her face. This whole nation is moved by what is happening here tonight, especially here in Hostage Square. Like you said, they are back in the hands of the IDF, a significant moment for them, for their families, for all of Israel, especially those right here in Hostage Square. More and more people continue to come here just to be part, I think, of this moment in history, to be part of seeing these hostages coming back to Israel, seeing them come out of the hands of Hamas, from the Red Cross, back into the hands of the IDF. This is a moment so many people here will not forget. You see people laughing, you see people crying together, hugging each other. This is a moment that's bringing people together, seeing these Israelis come home. They were taken kidnapped on October 7th, held in Hamas captivity. All 3 of them having their own issues. 2 of them, like you said, Emily, before, were shot on October 7th. Most likely did not receive any proper medical treatment at all in Hamas captivity. What their conditions could be like. Another one of them takes medication every single day. Did she receive that medication? What we know right now is that the 3 of these girls are back in the hands of Israel, in the hands of the IDF, which is what made people here the most happy, knowing that they were out of the hands of the Red Cross back into Israel. We are continuing to follow all of the raw emotion here throughout the entire night. I'm going to send it back to you guys in the studio. Emily?
All right, thanks, Shosh, for that update. Really emotional moments happening now. Kalev.
So many times at Hostage Square, since the first hostage deal was concluded, I've gone as a journalist, spoken with people there or heard from people there. The expectations for a hostage deal, the rumors, and then the disappointment it seemed to come so close so many times, and to finally see there at that scene there in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, where they have a legitimate reason to be relieved and happy and joyous. It is just
Absolutely. I mean, I just want to add for our viewers and, of course, also for our panel, I have spoken at length with the Gonen family, with Romi Gonen's family. I've actually been to their house in Kfar Vadim. I've seen Romi's bedroom that has been untouched since she left for the Nova Festival. And I remember that from the very beginning, I was very inspired, but also slightly disturbed and concerned at the positivity of some of these families. I mean, their ability to just keep going and keep believing that their loved ones are coming home no matter what, even in the face of immense despair, when they had every reason to fall to the ground and never get back up again.
Give a lot of credit, for example, to President-elect Trump for the hostage deal, but those people there in Hostage Square, they deserve majority credit because they kept up keeping this on the agenda, making sure, pressing the government and the international community and the Red Cross and all the parties involved to make sure that this issue comes forward. So let's give credit to all of those people who have come out day after day after day, or night after night in Hostage Square.
Absolutely, and we will circle back for a final summary before we end this broadcast. But before that, I do want to address the story of the Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, as well as several other ministers from his Otzma Yehudit party. Today resigned from the government over the hostage for ceasefire agreement. The right-wing firebrand said that his party would be willing to return to the Netanyahu-led coalition only if the war in Gaza is removed. We have more on this story from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Ahead of the cabinet vote on the ceasefire deal, right-wing Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir announced that his Otzma Yehudit party would leave the government if it passed. Indeed, Ben-Gvir and the other ministers submitted resignation letters this morning, and it goes into effect 48 hours after submission. Ben-Gvir called the hostage for ceasefire agreement reckless because it will lead to the release of hundreds of murderous terrorists and effectively erase the achievements of the war in Gaza.
לכן, אם העסקה המופקרת תאושר ותצא לפועל, אנחנו חברי עוצמה יהודית נמסור מכתבי התפטרות לראש הממשלה, ועוצמה יהודית לא תהיה חלק מהממשלה ותפרוש ממנה.
Ben-Gvir announced that after leaving the government, he will oppose any effort by the opposition to remove Prime Minister Netanyahu. He also said that should the war resume, they would be ready to rejoin the coalition.
אם המלחמה בחמאס תחודש, וזה מה שאמרתי ממש לפני מספר רגעים לראש הממשלה, אם המלחמה תחודש לשם הכרעה ומימוש מטרות המלחמה, אנחנו מבחינתנו נציע לשוב לממשלה.
The Likud party blasted Ben-Gvir, saying that anyone who dissolves a right-wing government will be remembered as an eternal disgrace. Even without Ben-Gvir's Otzma Yehudit party, Netanyahu's coalition still maintains a majority. If, however, Finance Minister Smotrich's religious Zionist party also quits, as hinted, the coalition would lose its majority.
Nag-aantay lang tayo guys kung kailan na paparating na dito yung mga hostages. Sabi na nasa ano na daw, nasa IDP na ang mga hostages. So soon, ano na sila, parating na sila dito sa may area talaga ng Israel.
Opposition parties are promising that they will support the coalition as long as it's advancing the hostage for ceasefire deal.
All right, and circling back to our panel here in the studio at ILTV, I'd love to start by asking you guys, circling back to the issue of the price of this deal. I mean, we're obviously very happy, almost in tears here, that we've seen the return of these 3 young women, but at what price? You know, we talked about hundreds of terrorists being released. I'd love to hear from you, Giddy, first. What is the price?
I actually think that there was no better deal to be made right now. That this is a deal in which the rates of exchange have been determined months ago. There's been some changes in the final stretch. Also, the terms of the deal actually have been predetermined by the fact that the government of Israel engaged with Hamas without creating an alternative to Hamas. So there was an internal conflict and contradiction in the policies of the government. On the one hand, calling for toppling Hamas, and on the other hand, negotiating with Hamas, not only on the prisoner exchange, but also on the future of Gaza. So that kind of internal contradiction came to the fore. This is what we're seeing on the screens right now. Hamas deploying in Gaza, overt military force, people in uniform holding guns. This is all a self-inflicted strategic blunder by the government of Israel. But we have to remember that what we're seeing these moments of exchange is also a very plastic moment in the history of the Middle East. We had one like that after World War I with the Sykes-Picot and the rearrangement of the Middle East. Another one after World War II with the bringing into being of Israel. Another one after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And now we're in another plastic moment. Iran has been pushed back. Hezbollah has been decimated. Hamas has been beat. There is a tremendous opportunity. These very, very personal moments, but also in the bigger picture, a tremendous opportunity for reshaping the Middle East. We need now strategy and vision from our government as it relates to the end game of Gaza, because this will determine how we look at the phase 2, which will determine how we handle ourselves from day 16 to day 42. 26 days of incredible consequences for the future of Israel coming up as of 2 weeks from now.
Khalid, do you agree that this was the best deal that could have been made now, or perhaps more international pressure? I mean, as we know, Emily Damari herself is a British citizen. We didn't see that much involvement on the British side, or did we? What's your take on this?
I don't. The best deal that could be made now. It was the best deal that was made until now. I can't speculate further. You could go back and say there are things that Israel could have done. Certainly, the international community could have done earlier to pressure, if not Hamas. Certainly, those countries like Qatar and Turkey that are back.
Nakipag-usap tong pusa ko, guys. Ayan o.
That really is a
Shalom!
conjecture about the price to be paid. I said earlier, and I want to reiterate the pain and heartbreak of those people who lost family members or loved ones to the terrorists that are being released. That is a price that is being paid right at the moment. What are the further prices? That will determine what decisions that the government will be making and maybe some of the other international parties involved. I do want to make one comment about Itamar Ben-Gvir. There are reports today that Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to appoint, at least temporarily, Avi Dichter, the Knesset member, former head of the Shin Bet, the Shabak, to be the national security minister in his place. I, as an Israeli, will sleep a little more soundly tonight with Avi Dichter in the position as national security minister. That's all I'll say.
I just want to make a quick comment. The British government had the most senior individual, civil servant, focused on the deal, almost exclusively. So they have been focused on it. They didn't play a front row role, but they were really focused on this issue.
And of course, we also have multiple American citizens, some of whom are still being held in captivity. And from day one, we've seen heavy American involvement from the Biden administration and even from the incoming Trump administration. Or I'd love to get your take, the price of this deal, the price for the families of the victims of Palestinian terrorists.
I think the price tag is mainly the Israeli hostages themselves, who have been going through hell over the past 15 months. And, when they say a deal has to be made, a deal has to be struck at any cost, we better make sure that we are not the cost, at the end. And Israel knows how to pay prices. Israel also knows how to release prisoners and make sure that they don't go back to terrorism. The recidivism rate of going back to terrorism, Gilad Shalit deal, as you mentioned, is over 80%. So there is a whole host of considerations here who are far from being zero-sum or not black and white. Israel owes debt to these hostages. They have to go back home, and yes, prices have to be paid. But we have become disillusioned from promises that we will know how to handle any scenario. There is no such thing as any scenario. There are basic, basal, foundational principles for Israel's security, but that does not include, by the way, the retreating to the 67 borders and having a tall wall hiding behind it. We have seen how that played out in Gaza. But on the broader scheme of things, I think really we are seeing a realignment of the Middle East here. There are seismic shifts, and the finishing leg has to be Tehran. Really, the way to Riyadh will go through Tehran. But there are numerous reports here that Trump is seriously considering a strike against Iran's nuclear program that will remove the one obstacle standing in the way of the Arab countries to come closer to home, come closer to Jerusalem. This will be the great moment where the new administration will be tested, whether or not we choose the way of appeasement or the way of peace through strength. And I happen to believe that this is not far beyond the United States' reach. When we want to make serious changes in the Middle East, we need to think big, we need to think innovative, and I think that Trump is exactly the person who knows how to do that.
One more brief word on the released prisoners. The Israel security establishment has shown it knows how to, so to speak, close the bill on those terrorists.
Andun ka na naman. Sige.
Years. So we should keep that in mind.
Dito ka.
Giddy, I wanted to ask you, in regards to the coming
Shalom.
months, coming years even under the Trump administration, what do you expect to see? What
Shalom.
could we see here in the Middle East, whether it be Iran or Israel or Hamas in the Gaza Strip?
So basically what we're looking at right now is
Hello guys, nag-aantay tayo ngayon sa pagdating ng mga hostages.
That will be transformative because this is part, as was mentioned earlier, this is part of a bigger American view of restructuring the Middle East from India through the Middle East to Europe, what is called IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. As part of that, as part of the security agreement between the US and Saudi, which is what the Saudis really want. The Saudis have one enemy, which is Iran. They are really interested in this deal. They're not as interested in the normalization with Israel. Obviously, it's nice to have, but the real issue here is the security pact with the United States against Iran with American forces in Saudi. This is really the core of the issue. In order to do that, the Saudis want what they call an irreversible path to Palestinian statehood. Honestly, I don't think they can get it from this government, but they can get a lot on the path to statehood. And in order to do that, there will need to be some sort of an arrangement in Gaza. And I believe that beginning on Thursday, this is what they'll be talking about in Washington. What is the deal? The deal maker in Washington is going to want to do a deal in Gaza. And that deal, in my view, I'm putting it out there, not as an opinion, but as an assessment. That deal involves the perimeter being determined as Area B, the rest of Gaza being determined as Area A, some sort of an introduction of the Palestinian Authority, upgraded and reformed, so that the international force could be brought in to begin the process of reconstruction and security, eventually leading to a discussion of the permanent status of Gaza.
Sorry, to cut you off, I believe that we do have apparently this is the hostages in the vehicle. We have confirmation now that they are in Israeli territory. They will soon be reunited with their parents, with their family members, but they are in Israeli territory. In addition to that, we're also receiving updates that right now President Biden is addressing the hostage exchange. Do we have that footage?
Reached this point today because of the pressure Israel built on Hamas, backed by the United States. Some said my policy of a firm support for Israel is relentlessly pursuing diplomacy, risked drawing America into a wider war in the region. I listened to those voices, many of whom I respected a great deal, but I concluded abandoning the course I was on would not have led us to the ceasefire we're seeing today. But instead, it would have risked the wider war in the region that so many feared. Now the region has been fundamentally transformed. Hamas's longtime leader, Sinwar, is dead. Hamas sponsors in the Middle East have been badly weakened by Israel, backed by the United States. Hezbollah, one of Hamas's biggest backers, was significantly weakened on the battlefield, and its leadership was destroyed. Even as we worked for diplomatic solutions in Lebanon, we provided ongoing assistance and supported Israel's military campaign against Hezbollah, including its efforts to take out the terror infrastructure along the border between Israel and Lebanon. Israel's campaign was extremely successful, so much so that by the end of November, the United States had brokered a ceasefire in Lebanon. Hezbollah did what it said it would never do. It cut its deal and abandoned Hamas. And today, in Lebanon, there's finally a new president and prime minister, both of whom support a sovereign Lebanon without Hezbollah running the show or playing any part in it. The Assad regime next door in Syria is gone, removing Iran's ready access to Lebanon. Iran is in the weakest position in decades after the U.S. military helped defend Israel from Iranian missiles and supported Israel's military response inside Iran. Just look across the region. In Lebanon, there's an opportunity for a future free from the grip of Hezbollah. In Syria, a future free from the tyranny of Assad. For the Palestinian people, a credible path to a state of their own. And for the region and the future normalization and integration of Israel with all its Arab neighbors, including Saudi Arabia, that I've spoken with. You know, we've had many difficult days since Hamas began this terrible war. We've encountered roadblocks and setbacks, but we haven't given up. A special thanks to my team, particularly Brett McGurk, who many of you know, who spent weeks and months working nonstop to reach this deal. Many of those weeks and months out of the country. Today's ceasefire in Gaza and the release of hostages is a result of a principled and effective policy that we presided over for months. And we got here without a wider war in the Middle East than many predicted. And now it falls on the next administration to help implement this deal. I was pleased to have our team speak as one voice in the final days. It was both necessary and effective and unprecedented. But success is going to require persistence and continuing support for our friends in the region and the belief in diplomacy backed by deterrence. So as we reflect on the news from Gaza today, we also remember all the victims of this war. We're mindful mindful that the pursuit of a lasting peace, while never easy or quick, must always be our calling. Well, thank you all for listening. May God bless you all. May God protect our troops. I'm looking forward to this deal being fully implemented. And I'm sorry I'm not going to take any questions now because I'm waiting. There's a whole congregation waiting for me. And I'm sure the remainder of the day I'll have an opportunity to speak with you. Thank you very much. Yes, I've just got a call saying the 3 are released into Gaza, 2 out of the hands of their captors, and they appear to be in good health, but it's early to tell. They may be across the border out of the Gaza Strip into Israel now. I'm not certain. Thank you.
All right, well, we did receive confirmation that those 3 hostages have been transferred into IDF hands. They are in Israeli territory. And just a few moments ago, we heard from the IDF spokesperson who also confirmed that the hostages were transferred into IDF hands and are in Israeli territory, currently in the process of being reunited with their family in a matter of minutes. Beyond that, he also emphasized the remainder of the deal, that there's expected to be 3 to 4 hostages released per week. And we also have an update on the ground from Hostage Square with Shosh Bedrosian. Shosh, are you with us?
Hey, Emily, yes. As you can hear behind me, we're hearing the IDF spokesperson confirm that both 3 of these female hostages are here, back in the hands of Israel. An exciting moment, but there are moments here where you can really hear a pin drop. People are quiet, they want to hear what's happening, they want to watch what's happening, and then all of a sudden you hear cheers of excitement, you hear these happy moments. I'm telling you, there are tears in everyone's eyes knowing that these girls are finally back home. There is so much excitement, but I think there's also a lot of pain that exists in this environment here in Hostage Square. I think what goes through everyone's mind, for me, is when did these girls find out they were actually leaving Gaza today? Did they find out minutes before? Did they know all day the same way that we did? There's so many questions of the conditions that they were held in. Who were they held with? Who did they have to say goodbye to when they left Hamas captivity? Who will they be able to tell once they are finally back with their families? Who will they be able to tell who they were held with? Will they have stories that they'll be able to share about the people they were held in captivity with? Now, I do want to say we have the teacher of Romi with us right now. She's about to join us on set. She's been holding this poster of Romi since October 7th. Is that correct? Yeah. Her name is Hani Nahmani. You are the teacher. We're the former teacher of Romi. Tell me what this moment means for you. What was it like for you to see this video of Romi coming out of captivity?
I haven't seen her many years because I was her science teacher in the elementary school. So I haven't seen her for many years. And now I'm so happy. I cannot describe how excited I am and happy. Yeah.
And so you've been holding this poster of Romi since October 7th. When you first found out that Romi was taken from the Nova Music Festival,
yeah, she was dancing in the festival, and
tell me what Romi is like. What is Romi like when you were her teacher? What was she like as a student?
She was so happy kid and very friendly. She had a lot of friends. She's very clever. She was a very good student, smiling and jumping all the time. So I remember her so good.
Yeah. That moment when you saw her face, though.
Oh, I was crying. I didn't know what to do with myself, jumping. Now I know that she's okay. She's safe. Yeah, I'm so happy.
It's a moment, and so many people were surrounding you because you have this connection to Romi, right? You have this. You were her teacher. You know what she was like when she was young. And you've been following her journey for 400 plus days of her in captivity. It's amazing. There's so many people that have connections like yourself. If you could say anything to Romi right now, what would you say to her?
Oh, I want to say, Romi, I love you. I want to hug you so much. I hug you from here. And you are amazing. You were an amazing kid, and now you are an amazing woman. You have a great family who will take care of you very good. And I'm so happy for you. So
Thank you so much, honey. Appreciate it. There's so many people that feel the same way. And it's exciting just to see the emotions that they have. And you told me this. You don't want to hold this poster anymore.
I came today with this to leave it here. Yes, I want to take it back home.
Amazing. Thank you. Emily, we'll toss it back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you for that and for that touching interview. We all are delighted, over the moon, to see the return of these 3 hostages. I just wanted to note that some of the footage that we were able to obtain that was aired during that was actually of the 3 mothers meeting with the IDF who were watching the transfer of their children from captivity into Israeli territory. So clearly very, very moving and exciting moments, and probably for the first time in a long time, something very, very positive that these families haven't been able to enjoy for 15 months. And for some families that's continuing, but for today, at least 3 families reunited in this moving moment of what's happening. I wanted to get a final comment from each of you in regards to this moment. You heard from Hani, the former teacher of Romy Gonen. What's your final takeaway?
Well, we need to be clear-eyed about where we stand right now. And the Middle East is watching and the world is watching. The last thing they need to see is Israeli weakness. And so, yes, we're extraordinarily happy to receive our hostages back home. I think this is a historic moment in Israel's history. And we hope to get as many hostages alive as possible. The deal will go on smoothly. And then we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, Iran. And all of its frontal defense, Hamas, as powerful as it may seem in Gaza, has much less capacities today than it used to have. Hezbollah, the Assad regime in Syria that fell, the Houthis are badly struck, and Iraq. All these leave Iran pretty weak and fragile and vulnerable. And so there is no better conditions now to checkmate Iran and finish it off and its nuclear program and pave the way for Middle East peace and prosperity.
Gidi, your final comments.
We saw today the exchange of 3 hostages out of 98. This means that the scenes we saw today have to be repeated 32 times for us to at least 32 times.
We have footage now. Sorry, I just want to point out we have footage now of some of the photos that have come from the transfer. That's Doron there with the braided hair. You can see that's Emily Damari being shown now on the screen. Really remarkable scenes. Of course, it's impossible to look at these images without looking at what's surrounding them. I mean, hundreds, thousands of Palestinians, including, you see right there directly, dozens of members of Hamas. Unimaginable reality for these young women, and such a relief that they are returning home. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off with that, but I just wanted to point out for our viewers some of the remarkable scenes that we're receiving now.
Yeah, so basically this scene of exchanging 3 out of 98 has to be repeated, if this is the pace, 32 times for us to finish the story. That requires us doing 2 things at the same time. Number one, remaining focused on the prisoner exchange and working out the technicalities that allow us to work from one phase to another. And the other one is having a guidance from our government about the strategic direction. What is the path to the day after? What is the path to the political horizon? To the extent that there will be a rebuilding of Gaza, how do we connect the economic side with the political side? And turn all of that into one package, one policy strategy package that is connected regionally, which we already spoke about, and also to the challenge of Iran. But to me, this moment is a moment also of tremendous acknowledgement and gratitude. First of all, to the IDF, to thousands and thousands and thousands of soldiers that went into Gaza to fight a war whose goal was to bring back the prisoners. Second is to the families, an incredibly committed and honorable process to keep the the thought of their loved ones alive, not just in Israel. I live in New York. Every Sunday in Central Park, there is a demonstration to unite Americans and Jews and everybody around them in the story. The third is Biden and Trump. Biden has carried most of the work with a very dedicated team. He mentioned Brett McGurk, an extremely committed negotiator. There was also, but the finishing hand here was the Trump team coming in and actually getting the job done, and the collaboration between them, we all know, is totally outstanding. This is probably the only issue in which they collaborated on. Remarkable. Thousands and thousands of people that came out to support the families, to support the deal. And finally, an outstanding healthcare system in Israel,
that we're seeing the best of Israel's medical capabilities. Everything is coming. This is really a moment. Showing the photos, waiting for
In just a moment, sorry, I just want to point out that in just a moment we will receive footage of them at the entrance of Kibbutz Be'eri, which is actually one of the places that was, there we go, we got the footage up now. This is one of the locations that was invaded by Hamas terrorists on October 7th, was hit very, very hard, this community, and despite that we see a victorious return, or a type of victory for at least these 3 young women who have been held for 15 months. Really remarkable to see this in real time, the transfer of these 3 hostages. We're hopeful that there will be many, many more. But we cannot minimize how exciting and how moving this moment actually is. Kalev, I would love to get your take on what we've seen as the final comments.
Let's celebrate the return of these 3 women today and hope that many more come. Let's steel ourselves for possible heartbreak in the coming, as soon as a week from now, as we learn the fate of some of the other hostages. Let's hope Israel's political leadership understands the gravity of the moment, that the decisions that it's going to be making in the coming weeks and months may well determine the future of this country and the region for years to come, and not make short-sighted decisions, but longer-term decisions. And finally, I would say the true strength of Israel and the Jewish people is the value it places on each and every individual life. Something we can't trace with its enemies. So these moments, what I do think of is Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. And that's what I think I want to see, these pictures.
Absolutely, and you can see here the very emotional moments. That's Romy Gonen's father, Eitan, that we're seeing. I've met him myself, just an absolute delight of a person. Unbelievable positivity in the face of unimaginable tragedy. And you see the moving moments now where they saw that their daughter, Romy Gonen, 24 years old, just 24 years old, kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th from the Nova Music Festival, and despite all odds has survived this incredibly difficult hostage negotiations. Impossible to look at these scenes without smiling.
Father of 2 daughters, it's hard.
Fighting back tears.
2 weeks ago, we read in the Parsha of the week about when Jacob hears that Joseph is alive. And it says in the Torah, Vayafug levavo, meaning he sort of fainted. He couldn't take it. And this is what we're seeing here. It's just incredible to be seeing it and to be here.
Absolutely. Well, all right. Well, we are out of time for at least this segment of the panel, but I do want to thank all of you guys for joining us today. Kalev Ben David, veteran journalist. We also have the head of the Reut Group, Gidi Greenstein, and we also, of course, have Or Yisrael from IDSF. An incredibly emotional day. We are going to jump one last time to our correspondent in Hostage Square, Shosh Bedrosian, with a quick update before we close. Shosh, what can you tell us?
Emily, you're emotional. All of us are emotional. You and I, Ariella, all of our other correspondents and anchors here at ILS TV have been covering this for 15 months, right? All of these hostages, all of these lives, all of these families who had a missing spot in their home for so long, and now you see 3 of them coming back to fill that spot that they once had, coming back from a place where we have no idea how they were held, what it was like there. We're coming back to a place that is welcoming them, a country that has been in tears, wanting to see every single glimpse of them. Now this is the first day of the first phase of this deal. Now we're expecting to see more hostages come out in about a week. It's unclear which day that is, but hopefully hopefully we will see more people reuniting. We saw a video of one of the hostages, family members reacting to seeing them in that Red Cross van. There is nothing more powerful than that, seeing these parents moved to tears. They moved mountains just trying to get their children back home. And now, look at it, it's full circle for them. Of course, we don't know, like we said, the conditions of what they were housed, what they went through physically, mentally, but they are back in Israel, to a place that is welcoming them, that wants them back home, a place that everyone is moved to tears. And as reporters, we've been covering this for a long time, so it's a nice moment to see all of this full circle for us too. Emily?
Absolutely. Thank you, Shosh, for that update. We also have Ariella on standby near the hospital where the hostages will soon be transferred for full examination as well as support, both psychological and medical. Ariella, what can you tell us? Do you have any update from the ground there?
Everyone here is still anxiously waiting. It's pretty quiet. Everyone's almost silenced by the anxiety, waiting to see that both Romy, Emily, and Doron come here right where I am. Just behind me, you can see the boarded fences, which is where they'll pass through and be in the hospital. And the hospital has been preparing for weeks in conjunction with the IDF and with the health ministry to receive them, not just for physical assessments and care, but also emotional support to make sure that this transition back home is as comfortable, as soft as possible after a staggering and unimaginable 471 days in captivity.
Now, Ariella, I know also that you have spoken to the Damari family, which was largely quiet for the first portion of this war and became very, very outspoken in recent months about the status of Emily, who, thank God, we have seen return back home to Israel. What can you tell us about Emily? A little bit about perhaps who she is. We know she was kidnapped from Kfar Aza, from her home. Hamas even shot her dog in the process. I mean, just awful barbarity, and of course 15 months in captivity. What can you tell us about Emily?
I mean, she's a beautiful young woman. She was taken from Kfar Aza in the area where most of the younger adults were living. It's thought actually that she was holding her dog, and when she was shot, she was shot in her hand, and it's thought that she was shot in her hand, and that's what killed the dog, that she was holding the dog. So, I mean, you could say that saved her life. But her mum's from the UK. Her mum was pretty quiet for the first year, I'd say, of Emily's time in captivity. I think, many families didn't know which the best approach would be, to draw less attention, to draw more attention. But we've seen her much more in the press in the last few months, talking with Keir Starmer. And thank God, here we are today, Emily is back home.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your updates from the ground. We, of course, will be giving a full report of everything going on with the hostages in tomorrow's update. But live from Israel, we are out of time. Again, I want to thank our panel for participating, for shedding some insight on this incredibly difficult yet exciting time that we had today during this broadcast, as well as all our viewers for tuning into this special live coverage of the hostage release of Emily Damari, Romy Gonen, and Doron Steinbrecher. I've waited a long time to report that. Please continue to pray for the safe return of all our remaining hostages being held by Hamas, hostages who will hopefully be returned in the coming weeks. As always, for the latest from Israel on all your devices, follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well. Thank you so much for watching.